Hey guys, it's Mr. V over here doing a book review today for Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Before I get into my book review, you guys should know that I do a spoiler-free book review where I give as few spoilers as possible. So if you see me looking down, I just have notes so I don't give any spoilers away. So let's get into the book review for The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. So this book was released in 1952, and this is basically the main protagonist is a black man, and he is growing up in the Jim Crow South. And later he moves to the North, but it's basically the struggles that a black individual has to go through growing up in the Jim Crow South, but even in the North when the country still had a lot of segregation and racism. So that is the main premise of the book. Because, yeah, as I said, this was released in 1952, so you have to remember there was still a lot of segregation and a lot of racism. And I don't know the exact year that this book takes place because he never discloses the year it takes place. But considering it was written in or released in the 50s, I assume it was meant to be in the 1930s or 1940s, especially considering the main character who was never said his name, the main character, his grandparents were slaves. And I can't get too far in depth because a lot goes on in this book, but I still want to give my official review. So overall, this was an interesting book. It was interesting as you'll find out why, but the it had a slower start. It did definitely have a slower start to the book, because you don't even fully know what's going on. You don't even know where this is like taking place in the beginning. Like, you don't know the exact location. You never know the exact location in the South. Later, he moves to New York, and he says he's moving to New York. But in the beginning, you don't know where it is. And again, it's never described. It's just later where you talk about the South. And you know it's the Jim Crow South based off the time period, but also based off how people are acting. In terms of there's still many segregated schools, many segregated places, and the way the black individuals are treated, and basically how even when they're talking in the book, how they need to look up at the whites as like the superior people. And there are some jobs that he takes in the book that he has to act like the whites are superior and things like that. But it was definitely definitely an interesting book because it was interesting seeing what it was like for the blacks in those days. Like, you always hear that stuff, but it's interesting seeing it and reading it because, this was a first person point of view. And it's very sad. It is definitely very sad seeing it. There is some humor thrown in, which is surprising. But it's definitely sad, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a bit. But it's definitely an interesting read because while it is a fictional book, I'm sure this is based off of somewhat true events, or this happened to different black people of the times. But the reason I say this is an interesting book is because it was well written. I felt that the author did a great job in writing it because everything flowed super smoothly. It was just basically from one chapter to the next. It is just from the end of the chapter to the beginning of the next chapter. It was a super just smooth transition. And even in the chapter, it grasps you, and then you could just keep reading it. And that was really good. And I felt it also had like really good dialogue because it brings you back to the time. Yes, it was released in 1952, so obviously they're going to use language from the time, but it brings you back to, I don't know if it takes place in the 30s or the 40s. As I said, he never says what year it takes place, but it really brings you back to the time, and it makes you feel like what it was like for a black growing up in that time period, where there was segregation, where there was racism. And, it's like how they had to not only feel, but they also had to act like the whites were the superior race. And you see, like, it's all a first person point of view of a black individual, but even like the fighting that happens among even the black people. That, as there are some of the black people that suck up, and then, they almost had to in those days. And then the discussions, but the dialogue between the black people who suck up and the ones who didn't, or things like that. So it was definitely a very interesting read for that. And it was also an interesting read because you saw the arguments among the black individuals. Not only were there the whites that would treat the blacks badly, but there were blacks that treated other blacks badly, kind of being like, you've got to suck up. Why aren't you sucking up? Or, things like that. And like there would be arguments between the black people. And to me, it felt almost like work. When you're at work, there's the boss, and there are people who will suck up to the boss. Other people just get the work done. But then among the coworkers, there's a lot of arguments or being like almost a rolling of the eyes, like, okay, you just did that purely to suck up. And, there was that kind of stuff. There was that type of dialogue between the black people in the book. So that's why it was very interesting. And you get the feeling throughout the book, like how it feels to be invisible and just judged purely off of looks. Like the people don't even know you, yet they're judging you. And you get that feeling throughout the book. And you get emotional. You see among the main character, you see his anger, you see his sadness, you see his emotion, and yet he can't do anything about it. So like you can feel those emotions. So that's why, it was a very interesting read for that. Now, some of the things I did not like in the book, though, is I thought that there was pretty bad character development, which is surprising considering it was a well-written book. But there was bad character development because he does not describe the character's appearance well. So you can't really envision the character much. But you also learn how the character is based off how they act. And I have no problem with that. But I mean, sometimes it would have helped to have a little background, but you learn how they are based off how they act. But the biggest problem with that is many characters are very short-lived. So by the time you get to know who the character is never going to appear in the book again. So, that was a part that really got to me. And another part is you don't always know the race of the character. Sometimes you know the race, many times you know the race, but you don't always know the race of the character. And for most books, you don't need to know the race. But in this book, considering race was like a central theme, I think you needed to know the race. And sometimes you don't know, like, are they like arguing because, it's a racial thing or is it a non-racial thing? And, that one part I felt like, and that goes back to the character development, I think. But, that's just some of the parts I did not like. Another part, though, I did not like was I felt that it was like too philosophical. Some parts were too philosophical, and I actually like philosophical books, but some parts were a little too philosophical to where I would look up online like what something mean. Like I would look at a chapter and be like, okay, I don't fully get what's going on, and then I would read the description and be like, okay, I can kind of see what's going on. But then I would go back, reread the chapter, and I was like, yeah, he still did things that were like too philosophical to where then you wouldn't, again, grasp everything that was going on. And, I thought that was not too good. And lastly, one thing I did not like was that he had longer chapters. And longer chapters can normally be fine. The problem with these longer chapters is that you basically had to finish the chapter, to fully get everything that's going on. It was hard to put the book down mid-chapter, or else you would sometimes pick it up and forget what had happened. So all of the chapters are longer chapters, by the way. So, that can make it a little difficult. Now, as for the end, I actually thought it was a good end. I judge an end based off many things. First of all, did you like the end? But does it wrap things up? What is everything? And I thought this was a good end. And I thought it was also a very impactful end. I thought he did a great job with the end for this one. And, I just thought overall that this was a good overall theme for the book. Just the whole book in general was a good overall theme. And I think that any race can relate. Like, you don't have to be a specific race. Because, some of the core themes are true about like how life can be so crazy or that things aren't always as they appear. And, I think any race can relate, and I think any race can enjoy this book. So, I'm going to rate this book. Now, I always rate mine on a scale of 0 to 10. A 0 is an awful book. A 5 is average, and a 10 is phenomenal. If it gets anywhere near 10, that should be on your reading list, because I'm a tough critic, and a 5 is average, so it's hard to move up even 1 point. So, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This was a little bit odd to rate, but I'm actually going to rate this book 6.5. Remember, 5's average. So I'm going to rate it a 6.5, which is pretty good in my rating system. The reason it did not get a higher rating, despite it having the great emotion, all that, the reason it did get a higher rating is because I thought there was bad character development, and it was sometimes too philosophical, where because of that I felt that sometimes you missed some of the themes. But overall, I'm still going to rate this a 6.5, and I definitely recommend that you guys go and read it at some point because it would definitely be an impactful book for you guys. But if you guys have any questions, comments, disagreements, please post it in the comments section below. I hope you guys click the subscribe button as I always upload multiple different book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy your reading.